Everyone around me said, give up, but I used every strength, every energy I had in me.
Welcome to Prism of Torah with Rebbe Saf Aaron Prisman, engaging Divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
Shalom Vracha. In this week's Parsha, Parshas Vayechi, Chazal teach us that Shimon had a special role. He was the Melamdei Tinoikos, the teacher of the young children. And this is what Yaakov was telling them before he passes away. Yet we know that Yaakov strongly criticized Shimon and Levi for what they did when they wiped out the city of Shechem because someone over there, Shechem ben Hamor, violated their sister Dinah. And this raises a big concern, a big question. Emes Yaakov Kamenetzky, Zatzal, asks a bomb question. He asks, I don't understand. How can it be that the same Yaakov Avinu who condemned them for their violent act and their anger, he even curses out their anger before he passes away, yet he saw fitting to place them, Shimon, to be in charge of teaching the younger generation? How does it make sense that the very person that he saw had a characteristic of anger and cruelty, violence, how did he entrust them with teaching and shaping the next generation? And he says a Mordecai idea. He says that a lot of times a certain characteristic trait in certain situations can be channeled in a negative way, but in other situations, that same character trait can be channeled in an unbelievable, positive way. Emes Yaakov explains to us that although Yaakov Avinu did curse out their anger, and it's true, they should have consulted with him before performing the actions they did at the time, and maybe he would have stopped them. However, he saw in them a certain extreme passion for caring about others, for doing the right thing. They had Mesirus Nefesh. In fact, the Pasuk tells us, and Chazal tells us, and Rashi brings us down, that Shimon and Levi were not only called the sons of Yaakov, they were also called the brothers of Dinah. Why were they the only ones singled out to be called the brothers of Dinah? The answer is because they really, really, truly cared for her. And that's why they did what they did. And they wiped out the city of Shechem, which perhaps was not the right thing to do in Yaakov's eyes. However, it came from a very good place. They cared for Dinah and they thought justice has to be done. Perhaps that wasn't the right way justice needed to be done. And that's why Yaakov was rebuking them for that. However, we have to understand, he saw this unbelievable potential they had in them because they really cared and they wanted to do the right thing. And hence he thought, this is perfect, that Shimon will be the one teaching the next generation. This is exactly what we need. Someone with the passion to do the right thing, to bring up the next generation. That fire, that intensity, that inability to compromise when someone needed their help. The extreme level of caring to ensure that all the kids are brought up in the right way, to ensure they do the right thing in life. That is what Yaakov saw. Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein extrapolates this idea to our daily lives. Many times we look around, we see negative traits in people, in ourselves, in our children, our students, our colleagues, our friends. But we have to understand that perhaps it is exactly that characteristic trait that in certain environmental conditions is channeled the right way. It can do wonders. My Chavrusa Rabbi Schechter told me about this unbelievable gra in Mishlei, about the famous pasuk Chanoch Hanar al pi darkoi. Over there, the gra says that there's certain inherited traits that cannot be changed, and a person must channel and use that nature to use that trait in the right way. And there's also certain middos that a person has, middos that he has to all the time fix them and try to become better and refine them. That is why we're here in life. But the main point I'm trying to bring out, Rabbi Baruch Schechter, my Chavrusa, told me, is that it is this character trait that we have to channel in a proper way, because you cannot suffocate yourself. You have to use the trait you got and use it in a proper fashion. This reminds me of the Gemara in Shabbos. The Gemara in Shabbos talks about a person that his nature is that he has a tendency to do something with blood. So a person can take it to an extreme negative way and use it to chas v'shalom, kill people and be a murderer, or he can use it to be a moyel or to be a shoichet. That also has to do with blood, but he's channeling that in order to do mitzvahs, to do something good in the world. It's true that human nature is to always see the negative, but we have to take the trait that perhaps is not negative, is neutral, and it can actually, in certain situations, be a very positive trait. There's a famous gra about the Gemara in Brachos. The Gemara in Brachos says that there's two psukim, and when a person got married, sometimes the friends asked him, so you have a good wife? So he said a pasuk. The pasuk represented if the wife was good or bad. The pasuk that represented that the wife was good was, whoever finds a wife finds good. It's in the past tense. Written in the past tense, but the pasuk representing that the wife was bad is in the present tense. I find the woman more bitter than death. The grass, what's the difference? Why, when we're saying that the wife was bad, it's in the present tense, whereas when she was good, we're saying it in the past tense? And he answers, because that is human nature. The tendency is that when we see good things, we're already forgotten about them. They're already in the past. But when it's something bad, it's in our face. But we have to go beyond that and try to see the positive. No matter what trait it is, we have to realize that when put in the right environmental conditions, it can be unbelievable. This is exactly what Yaakov saw in Shimon, that despite the fact that he did something that that Yaakov felt wasn't the most appropriate way of doing it, but he saw that positive passion to do the right thing, the extreme care for his sister. And that's where Zilberstein is telling us, in everything in life, one should see that the same trait can be used in a positive way. And that's how we have to go through life, seeing how we can use our traits in a positive fashion. Instead of eliminating a character trait that we have, perhaps we have to channel it in a positive fashion. There are two stories I want to share with you today. I think they're both very good and yet slightly different. One is a personal story. Back in my yeshiva high school days, our coach, Reb Jeff Dorfman, I'll never forget what happened. I'm not sure if he'll remember. There was one player on the team. Let's call him Danny. He was stubborn. He was intense. He wouldn't back down from anyone. During practices, he'd always argue. During games, he'd always push back on every strategy. Coach Dorfman pulled him aside constantly, and he told him, Danny, you're messing everything up. You're messing the team chemistry. You need to work on this. I'll never forget what happened. One practice, our coach Jeff Dorfman completely changed Danny's role. Instead of having him run plays like what he usually did, he says, instead of trying to shoot the ball, why don't you just set picks, which is something totally different. He just stood like a wall. But he was a great wall because he used that intensity, that stubbornness, to stop the other team, in short, from messing us up. At the end of the day, it made a major change also in his personality and the way he glued the team together, and that made a big difference. That's story number one. Story number two is unbelievable. I got this from Rav Avram Stulberger. He called this story, Every Soul is Precious. And it's talking about a young Jewish boy that grew up. Yeah, probably he had ADHD, constantly struggling to control himself in class. It was in 8th grade. He had a certain Rebbe who totally understood him. This Rebbe said to him, there must be something you're good at. Let's work together. How about this? How about that? Finally, he realized that he's very good in painting. He leveraged off that energy, that unbelievable skill that he had, and it changed everything. However, the next year, for some reason, that Rebbe had to take a year off. The new Rebbe came, and it was horrible. This substitute that came, from day one, this boy knew it would be Gehenna, literally. What are you doing? Sit down, sit straight. He couldn't take it anymore. It was horrible. He couldn't pay attention. What are you doing? You're good for nothing. That's the only types of voices he heard that year. The year finally ended. But that pain that boy had was always echoing in his mind. But let's fast forward many years. This boy took his energy, took his inability to stay in one place all the time, and used those same traits to become an incredible Hatzalah member for emergency situations. He channels those exact traits. The refusal to just do the regular thing, to stay in class, to sit down all the time, into saving lives. One Friday night, in his late 20s, there was a call. An elderly person, a grandfather, had a heart attack and was in critical condition. The Hatzalah team worked desperately to try and resuscitate him. Finally, everyone said, the time has passed. We did everything. We give up. There's nothing more that can be done. But this person didn't listen. He kept going. Give up already? No way. But they told him, come on, there's no chance. He refused. He continued. He did everything he could. They yelled to him, give up already, give up already. But with his hands on the chest, breathing, everything. And minutes later, sure, lo and behold, he brought him back to life. The grandfather started breathing again. A few months later, this person was invited to the Sudat Toda'ah for the man whose life he has saved. As he walked into the room, he saw the beautiful family gathered together to give thanks to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He looked into the grandfather's eyes. Now he had color. He was alive. He looked better. And suddenly he recognized him. This was a substitute Rebbe from that terrible year he had. The grandfather called him over, eager to express his gratitude. He said, I can't thank you enough. You saved my life. And he said back, it was my pleasure. But do you remember who I am? Do you see who I am? This grandfather looked carefully, said, no, I can't remember. Well, about 15, 16 years ago, I was in your class. Oh yes, the Rebbe said, I remember. The one who sat in front, the one who never listened, the one I had a lot of trouble with. He said, that's right, that's exactly right. You told me I can never listen. I can't do anything. I can't sit in one place. I want to tell you something. The reason I was able to save your life is exactly for the same reason I wasn't able to sit in class for more than 10 minutes. Everyone around me said, give up. But I used every strength, every energy I had in me. That's why we're here today. The grandfather started crying. He asked for forgiveness 1,000 times. I think it's an unbelievable story because it brings out this idea that it's the same trait that sometimes can be looked upon negative, but when used in the right and appropriate conditions, and when you channel it the right way, can be a lifesaver. Have a good Shabbos.
This concludes another episode of The Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on The Prism of Torah.